Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host, Phil Lindsey. From the Star Wars universe comes one of the most popular warrior cultures of all time, featuring a lone bounty hunter on a quest to return a mysterious child to its own kind while fighting enemies and the remnants of the evil empire along the way. We're talking about The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is a fantasy action series based on the Star Wars universe of characters created by George Lucas and streaming on the Disney Plus service. The show is the first Star Wars live-action series ever produced and is a mix of science fiction as well as Old West storytelling, depicting the title character as an outlaw and the planets he visits as poor frontier towns. Characters and planets that are familiar to Star Wars fans are peppered throughout the show and more revealed during the course of the first two seasons. Created by Jon Favreau, The Mandalorian premiered in November of 2019 and is set 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. The show follows the adventures of Din Djarin, also called Mando, a Mandalorian who operates as a bounty hunter. Mando is hired in the first episode to retrieve an asset and bring it back to his client, who is an agent of an Imperial Remnant faction. The client offers the reward of Mandalorian Beskar, a nearly destructible steel which is highly valued throughout the galaxy. Mando retrieves the asset, which he discovers to be a small child. The child was part of the species that also included the legendary Jedi Master Yoda, though that character's name was never mentioned in Season 1. Though he risked his life to return the child to his client, Mando instead decided to take the child back. He fled with the child and went on the run, trying to stay one step ahead of other bounty hunters, as well as the Empire and the Rebels. Mando is assisted on his journeys by a recurring cast of characters including Greef Karga, the leader of the Bounty Hunters Guild, Cara Dune, a former Rebel shock trooper turned mercenary, Pili Moto, a mechanic managing a spaceport on Tatooine, and the Armorer, the leader of Mando's warrior tribe. The primary antagonist of the series is Moff Gideon, the leader of the Imperial Remnant which hired Mando. Gideon's reasons for wanting the child have not been revealed, though it was revealed that he possesses a powerful weapon called the Dark Saber, which is a Mandalorian lightsaber. Season 2 featured the first appearance of Boba Fett, the bounty hunter from the original Star Wars trilogy. Season 2 also promises to deliver the wildly popular Ahsoka, a character from the animated series Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The Mandalorian was the first production to be filmed using realistic rendering, providing much more realistic environments and thus improving the overall presentation. The stagecraft technology gives the actors a more favorable experience as they are able to interact within their environments instead of being in front of a green screen. There has been talk of expanding the Mandalorian franchise to the big screen and including the characters in other Star Wars productions. There's also been discussions regarding spin-off series which would expand the show even further. The Mandalorian was met with rave reviews from fans and critics alike. The show received a 93% positive rating for Season 1 on Rotten Tomatoes and has won numerous awards for outstanding visual effects, editing, and costuming. The Mandalorian continues to be one of the hottest shows of 2020. Its grand storytelling, combined with its rich characterization and exciting action, make it one of the most popular presentations of the Star Wars universe. And that's the lowdown on The Mandalorian. So when I was a kid, we had Star Wars. We had the original Episode 4, and I saw Episode 4 in the theater, first run, because yes, I am that old. But I was a kid, if that counts. I was but a wee lad when I saw that movie. But for years, during my teenage years, even after Jedi, there were rumors, there were whispers of, oh, he's going to do something else. Lucas is going to bring it back. Look out. And by that time, I think the comic books were starting to happen. The comics had always kind of been there because Marvel had the license at one point. And a lot of those books now are collector's items, and rightfully so. But I think Dark Horse was picking up the license at that point, and the novels had always been around, like expanding the universe, and Lucas signed off on it, but supposedly he didn't care about it. He never kept up with it. He wasn't calling any of the shots. He just made it very clear none of this is canon, and it never will be. So there had always been kind of rumors of something happening. There was going to be a fourth movie. Oh, look out. But then talk started becoming, oh, there's going to be a TV show. It's going to be a Star Wars TV show. So that became the buzz. This is long before the internet became a thing. And then even after the internet, it got worse because then it became, oh, well, and all these rumors and innuendo and all this other crap. So fast forward now to 2020 to say that we have a living, breathing Star Wars series is not lost on me at all. I don't look at this as, oh, well, of course we do, because why don't we? And it's a streaming service, and that's what it should be. No, because I remember in the before time when there was no streaming Star Wars anything. So, having said all that, I'm a huge fan of The Mandalorian. I don't know if I knew what to expect. When I heard it wasn't about Boba Fett, I did a double take and said, then why are we doing this? But I didn't give Jon Favreau enough credit. Shame on me. I'm a huge Marvel fan. I'm a huge Iron Man fan, obviously. So I should have known better. And not for nothing, he directed Elf, which, by the way, is one of the best Christmas movies of all time. I'm sorry, it's how I feel. So I should have had faith, man, but I didn't. I don't know if I dreaded it. Okay, maybe I dreaded it, because let's face it, Star Wars is not always a hit every single time now, unfortunately. So you told me, I think it was last week, we were talking off air about Mandalorian. You said you binged all of season 1 like at one time. Is that right?
Yeah. I just recently got Disney Plus. I plan to start watching it. So I'm like a huge Sasha Banks fan, and
Right.
I had already planned to start watching it. But once I saw the trailer for season 2 and I saw she was in it, I was like, okay, I have to get caught up now so I can watch it as it airs.
So, I mean, I know you're a Star Wars fan. Have you been like a diehard Star Wars fan in the past? Or are you just casual? Or, I mean, where does your allegiance lie when it comes to the Star Wars universe?
I would say I've gotten more and more a Star Wars fan the older I get. I wasn't a huge Star Wars fan when I was a kid. And that's because I just didn't grow up in that era. I mean, I went
Right.
back and watched them, of course. But once the boom came and like the prequels came, and the prequels aren't the best movies, but they
Right.
did respark a lot of my interest in the franchise, and it made me go and look at other things that I did enjoy. And then we did get things like the Clone Wars series on Cartoon Network and some of the other stuff, and it made me search out things like comics and video games that made me more a fan of the lore.
Man, their animated stuff has almost always been a hit. Like the Clone Wars stuff has I don't want to say a separate fan following, but sometimes it feels like a separate fan following, like different from the movies, like of all these fans that appreciate the Clone Wars stuff. I'll be honest with you, man, I never got into it. Not that I had anything against it. I just haven't given it a chance. Have you ever like really got into that show? Like I guess you could say binge that show as well.
I watched a few episodes. I didn't watch it as much as I did like the anthology that they had on Cartoon Network and some of the other animated stuff. But I know people are like huge into it, and Ahsoka fans are super duper passionate. So,
Right.
but I can't say that I'm like well versed in the show.
Well, again, going back to the Mandalorian, I didn't know what to expect, and I should have, kept more of an open mind. Shame on me for that, because I love this show, and I watched the first episode with my wife, and halfway through it, she goes, "Thing's dragging." I'm like, "What?" And I had to pause it, and I'm like, "What'd you just say?" And she goes, "It's dragging. It's too long." Oh, I'm not married to a fangirl, in case you can't tell. So, uh, it is what it is. It's okay. But it does take time to tell a good story. It's like someone being impatient with a wrestling storyline. They just started Monday. Why are you going to, now, of course, if you're talking about WWE, it's a whole different story, because they tend to just, drop things on start on Monday, drop on Tuesday. That's a different topic for another show. But patience is virtue here, man. Like it's key. Like, yes, these things take time to tell. And, episode 1, I don't want to say it felt like it took a while, but I was just pumped up to watch it. And when I started getting into it, I really got into it. And then I couldn't wait to see episode 2. So the bad thing about Disney Plus is they don't drop everything on a Friday like Netflix tends to do. You get one a week, just be patient, which is even harder. So the whole tone of this show, and it's been well covered, I'm sure, by a lot of other fans out there. This is a Western, and I don't know that I saw that coming. Did you pick up on that? And how soon had you picked up on that? I guess what I should say is, What did you heard about the show before you decided to watch it? Have you already had things spoiled for you, or did you go into it with a clean slate?
I didn't have anything spoiled for me, luckily. When I first saw it, and I mean, I was interested right away when I first heard the news. Like, I mean, when you hear Mandalorian, there's just so many. Like, if you are interested in Star Wars lore at all, when you hear Mandalorian, it like immediately piques some interest because you think Boba Fett, you think like cool armor, you think like these are supposedly like the most badass killers in the galaxy. So like you just know this is going to be good, and then all of the names that I saw attached to it, Favreau and some of the actors, I was like, yeah, this is probably going to be good. And then when I saw the first trailer, I was like, oh, this looks really good. But I didn't get to it right away because I don't know if you're like me, but I have so many streaming platforms right now that I'm signed
Yes.
up to. So like once I started getting rid of some of them, I was like, okay, let me try Disney Plus. And so when I tried it, I was like, okay, I have to get on Mandalorian.
Yeah, I'm the same, man. I've got all these services. I could probably purge some of them and not even miss them, if I'm being honest. But if I do decide to start purging one day, Disney Plus will not be one of them because I mean, not just for the Mandalorian sake, but the Marvel content they have, obviously, and also because the new Marvel series that they've got coming, which I'm sure we can do a podcast about one of these days when they Scarlet, what is it, WandaVision actually hits, which I think they've pushed to January now, unfortunately for us. But yeah, this will be the one service I keep. I'm a Western fan. It's easier for a guy that's a middle-aged guy in 2020 to say, "Oh, I like John Wayne." I mean, I can't say as a kid, "Oh, I didn't really like westerns as a kid." If I'm being honest, it wasn't until I became an adult that I started to look back and start picking up movies and watching things, and I developed a love for Jimmy Stewart because he's become one of my favorite actors. I like John Wayne a lot. So yeah, I got into those westerns, and when I started watching The Mandalorian, it occurred to me, and I don't know that I read it anywhere or heard it from anybody. I was like, God, this is starting to feel like Clint Eastwood. This feels like, stranger rides into town. No one knows who he is. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? He ends up helping the town. Helps the town against the villain who's been making their life hell for years. Like, it's kind of what this was to me. I mean, Mandalorian, they just call him Mando because he has no name, right? He just looks like a gunslinger, man. I mean, the aesthetic of the whole thing is just perfect. That's the vibe they're going for. They definitely nailed it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the original Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy has a lot of Western tropes when you think about it. Um, I mean, just like a lot of the original shots from the original movie, New Hope, it just to me it has like some of those same invocations as westerns. Like all of the sunsets and all this stuff like in the desert. For some reason it just has that tone. I don't know if that's just me.
No, I can see that, and also if you think about it, going back to episode 4, it's so minimal.
Yeah.
The wardrobe, the costuming, the sets. I mean, which were grand in scale, obviously, but they're in the desert. It's minimal. It's not like now you make a sci-fi movie. Now it's millions of dollars spent on CG and special effects, and nothing's real, and it's all blue or green screen, blue screen, whatever. So like, but then it was practical effects. It was stormtroopers were actors wearing the suits. It wasn't nothing was CG, no such thing. So yeah, dude, I totally get that the whole Western vibe. I mean, uh, I I love the idea of the Mandalorian. I love the idea that he doesn't have a name. He's got no identity. It took a long time before we ever saw his face, which I personally was shocked when we saw his face. I didn't see that coming. So they threw me there. So Pedro Pascal is the voice of the Mandalorian. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was never a Game of Thrones guy. So I can't say that I was familiar with this guy's work. Did you recognize the voice when you started hearing Mando talk?
I didn't because I didn't watch Game of Thrones either. It did sound familiar, but I just couldn't place where I got it from. And I didn't like look up his IMDb or do any Google searching, but he did sound familiar, and I kept wondering like I know this voice, but I couldn't remember from what.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I don't really have anything to base it on. The only Mandalorian we ever heard speak was Boba Fett, right? So that very calm, reserved sort of speaking. I mean, we heard Jango Fett as well, but
Yeah.
I don't often flash back to the second trilogy. That's just me though. But yeah, the idea that this thing is not just a bounty hunter. It's not just a guy in a suit of armor. This is a religion. It's a faith. It's a following. I don't want to say cult. It's just how they live. And it's hard to put into words really what you're looking at, because it's the idea of a religion is it's not a strange concept in Star Wars universe, because you got the Jedi who are basically a religion. But I think it's very cool now that we get to see another side of that discussion in this universe, where we have the Mandalorians who I don't know. It's so hard to put into words, man, because the Jedi are like, they're peace. They're about peace. They're peace-loving people, but they have weapons. So if they have to, throw down, they will. They can. They've got the power to do it. But the Mandalorians are obviously gunslingers. They obviously, they're defending themselves. They carry weapons. So I'm not sure what that falls on. I have to admit, I've not researched it enough to understand what this so-called religion is about. You ever thought about that?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's like the Mandalorians is like a code. It's like, they're trained to be like some of the best killers and, warriors in the galaxy, but they still have like a code and they still have a way of life. And that's why it's always like, this is the way. Like we don't do that, or this is what we live by.
This is the way, right? That stuff's getting into pop culture, man. Like I hear that mentioned a lot. That if you say this is the way to someone and they don't know what you're talking about, they obviously have not watched Mandalorian. So I have to say he looks awesome. If we can just talk about the suit. I mean, he gets new armor. I think it's in episode 3. Yes, episode 3 entitled The Sin, which I'm actually watching right now, is when he gets the new armor, the new Beskar steel. And he's bright and shiny, kids. He looks great. Looks like a little action figure, which Boba Fett was one of my favorite action figures. And unfortunately, I did not have the detachable rocket, which now is like a collector's item. Because it was a choking hazard. They had to get it off shelves because a kid choked. I don't know if he died or not.
Wow.
But yeah. And it was like, wait a minute. No one watched Timmy, the 2-year-old with the toy that had the pop-out rocket in the back? What? But there wasn't exactly a lot of, let's watch our kids in the early 1980s. It was more like, oh, you got a gun, go outside and play with it. Just shut up, So that's kind of how things were, man. I'm telling you. But yeah, he looks great. He didn't look bad before the upgrade in the armor, but he looked great afterward. I mean, it's kind of easy to forget about Boba Fett. It's so weird how this show's about a Mandalorian, and I kind of forgot about Boba Fett after the first episode. I'm like, I don't care. The guy's dead. Who cares? And then we got to season 2. We'll get into that. Let's talk about what everyone calls Baby Yoda. So, what is your particular theory on who the child is, what the child is? Is he a time traveler? Is he Yoda reincarnated? What is going on here?
It's hard to place it. I mean, he's clearly force sensitive. He's clearly a Jedi in some way. And I don't know if that is something we don't understand about Yoda's race of people, where they are more, if you want to go with the new age Star Wars mythos, do they have more midichlorians than, any other race, or if they're more adept to be force sensitive. So I wonder if that's what we're going to go with this. Like, are we going to learn more about that race?
Honestly, if I had to guess, my guess is he's Yoda reincarnated. I think he came back, because they've never said, and they've played this close to the vest, which tells me they probably don't know. Like they know now. But dude, Lucas didn't know. He just put a Muppet in the movie. He didn't care. Like, it wasn't, I don't think there was any deep meaning behind this at all. I think that it's becoming something now because it can. Dude, I don't think there was ever an answer as what Yoda was. We just called him Yoda. There was a Yoda, a female Yoda, in episode 1 I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen like the concept drawings for it, but it's one of those blink if you missed it things. Like
Right.
you have to be like really paying attention.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think anyone really knew what to expect. I didn't, because I didn't know anything about this at all when I watched the first episode. So in episode 1, the Mandalorian takes this deal. He's looking for jobs. He's a bounty hunter, obviously. He's doing his thing. And he takes this job from this guy that's ex-Empire. And obviously this takes place after Return of the Jedi. And you could tell he's ex-Empire because he's got some stormtroopers hanging out, which is very cool. That the armor was no longer shiny white. It was brown. It was dusty. I mean, don't know what this guy had done to command the allegiance of what was left of the stormtroopers. That's an interesting story. But I find it funny that they never really went back and delved any deeper into that. I'm hoping that in season 2 they get into who was he, why did he want the child, what were they going to do with him. I mean, did they ever fully explain that, like, to your satisfaction?
No, but once we understand like who he's working for, then it's kind of like, oh, like once you understand who he's working for, it's like, oh no, he's the story.
Right,
like,
right.
He's the real big bad of the story.
Right, because we saw him, the him you're talking about, shows up in a TIE fighter. And he's dressed kind of like Vader. He's got all the black and he's got a lightsaber. And that was like, okay, this thing suddenly became something else.
Yeah, and he's, oh man, we got to talk about that later. He doesn't just have a lightsaber. He has like a pretty like notable lightsaber. Like, and it has like pretty big ties to Mandalorian lore.
Yes. Yes, we'll get there. So, there are traces of the Star Wars universe here. I mean, Tatooine, you got the sand. In season 2, I'm going to skip around a little bit. In season 2, he lands on an ice planet that we're not told is Hoth, unless I missed it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the chances, right? Like, how big is the universe? These people end up on the same planets all the time, which is very odd. But
yeah,
it's not like living in the same state and end up in the same town all the time. I mean, that's going to happen. But this universe here is a big galaxy, right? So there's traces of the Star Wars universe, and we know it's there. We know that's where this is taking place. So, but it's very like minimalistic. There's not a lot of proof, not a lot of evidence there. So when we saw a lightsaber, like, oh my God, it's a lightsaber. So that kind of is a startling reminder, and especially the TIE Fighter, startling reminder that yes, this is indeed a Star Wars show. The action scenes in this thing, I think, for the most part, they're well timed. I think they're in the right places. I've not felt to this point there was any like gratuitous violence. It's not that kind of show. It's all action, right? But I never really got the feeling that it was, well, they could have done without that. I mean, it's a lot of blasters. It's some fisticuffs here and there. I'm on episode 3 now, where all the Mandalorians, dive in to save the day, and it's an amazing scene. I love this scene so much. They've all got the rocket packs on. Just to see all of them as a collective, like standing up for one of their own. It's pretty good stuff. The idea of him going rogue and taking the child. Episode 3 is one of my favorite episodes, because he makes the decision to go back and get this creature, because he had questioned, what are you going to do with it, right? And he was basically told, it's none of your damn business, right? In so many words. And then he makes the split decision. And I don't know if we know by this point his background. Maybe we do. That he's not actually a Mandalorian. He was taken in as a child. So that's the connection. But dude, that episode, so much fun. When he decides to go back and take the child, one of the coolest things I've ever seen in this show, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we get the cool part at the end of episode 1 where the assassin droid is going to kill it, and he just like immediately domes him. He just like immediately headshots him.
Right. Yes. So cool. And then you get to see what's going on, and he puts his little hand out and he touches his finger. You're like, oh my God, these two are making a connection that quick. And I don't know, in the Star Wars universe, you just consider bounty hunters to be heartless. They're in it for the money, obviously. It's all mercenary work. But this guy is different, man. He's much different than what we've seen before. And it's got a very lone wolf and cub vibe to it. Yeah. And in Nomad, when Nomad had his own series, they kicked that series off. This was in the mid-90s, I think, late 90s maybe. But he had a baby that he was protecting. He was on the run. And it really reminds me of this. I'm sure they were going for a lone wolf cub situation also, but just the idea of a tough guy, but he cares enough about this child to want to help it, to want to, save it from what he knows is going to be a bad situation. He doesn't have to be told what's going to happen to the child. It doesn't matter. He knows whatever the it is not going to be good. So talk about the character change with this guy, man. Just out of the blue, going back to rescue this child.
Yeah, I mean, once we learn more about him, I'm not even sure if it feels kind of like a character change. It just feels like a shift of what we know about Mandalorians. And it's kind of like you expect so much of this character coming in. I mean, especially like the opening scene, he gets his first bounty. He throws the guy, and he throws the guy that tries to escape, which is hilarious. He tries to go down and use the bathroom, and he throws the guy in a what is that thing called with the
carbonite. Yeah,
the carbonite. He throws him in a carbonite, and so you kind of get this idea of, oh yeah, he's what we know of Mandalorians. He's what we've seen of guys like Jango Fett or Boba Fett, and so once we also see that he's like, oh no, this guy is like, he like has a heart as well. It's like, and then once you know his backstory, it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense.
And talk about characters in this show, man. We got to hear Nick Nolte, which I admit I didn't know it was Nick Nolte at the time, as Quai, I think or Quill, and he was the creature that helps him get across the desert. And such a cool part and such a great character. How you don't know along his journeys who this guy's going to interact with. But I'm a sucker for a feel-good ending. I can't help it. I'm not much for that. Everyone's dead in the end. That sucks for me because I want the hero to win, man. That's how I am. But he helps the Mandalorian get to where he needs to go, a Mudhorn. And it's one of the funniest things where he's trying to tame this thing in order to ride on this thing and get to where he's going. And it's just, I don't know, it's just one of those episodes where I think that this show has a lot of work to do, or does a lot of work, I should say, in just making the backdrop, like where they are, become its own character in and of itself. Like you really feel as though they are where they're supposed to be. Like the environment feels alive. The people who live there, the aliens that live there, that inhabit that world, they feel real. It doesn't just feel like, set dressing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Like I think that's so much of the first few episodes of being on that planet they're on with where he goes to get all of his bounties. It's just it's a whole part of the story in itself. So when you return to it later in the season, it's just like it just has so much familiarity to it already.
Absolutely, and the fact that we get to see Jaws is even better.
Yes.
The fact that they want him to go get this egg, and like they won't give his shit back to him. They won't give him any. It's got to go get this egg, and you're like, all right, what's the punchline? What's the egg? No, it's just an egg, and they just eat it. They just. Which is one of the grossest things. I don't know why it's so gross, because it's not. Why does that gross me out so much? It's not even real. Like, what do I care? But it's just, they're all going nuts for this thing, man. It's so funny. The Jaws are like the comedy relief of anything they're in. By virtue of the fact of what they look like, how they sound, and all that good stuff. But it was cool to see a sandcrawler. It's cool to see the Jaws. And again, he's interacting with these characters, with these worlds that he's in. And, that's like the first like what 1 through 3 episodes is that the fact that he is, he takes this bounty and he's got the child. He's trying to get back to where he's supposed to be with it. And then he decides, nope, I'm going to take off. I mean, what a way to kick off a series, man. I got to say, when I started getting into this, I couldn't get into it enough. Like, I couldn't wait for the next episode to come out because, I don't know, man. Like I said, the thing just feels so alive. We got to talk about Carl Weathers because he's fantastic in anything he's in. So talk to me about his character in this show.
Yeah, I just think his character is great throughout. I mean, in the first episodes, he's kind of just like, good job, man, made me all this money. Then once he starts messing with the money, it's like, what are you doing? Like, what? Right. And he just sells all of it so well. He just has such a natural presence to himself. And he has that in everything he's in. Like, all of his humor always resonates. Like, all of his he just delivers his lines really, really naturally. And this is just me thinking of him like as like one of the first black action heroes that I can think of. Because when I always think of him, I think, of course, of Rocky, but I also think of Action Jackson.
Yes.
So it's like I've always held him in such a high regard.
He's so good. I mean, I love this guy. I love this guy to death. And of course, I always think about Predator because anybody was in Predator. Such a good film. That first movie's classic. I didn't care much for the sequels that happened afterward, but and then of course I think about Chubbs in Happy Gilmore. I can't not think about him as Chubbs, right? Because he's got a sense of humor. It's pretty cool. I actually have that pop vinyl, by the way, the Chubbs pop vinyl. So had to get it with the wooden hand. It's pretty sweet. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I love him in this show. And dude, I really wanted him to be a good guy. When I knew that Mando did the thing, I'm like, oh, he's going to turn on him. This is going to become one of the guys that's after him. And then he turns out, no, he's going to be an ally. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever because I don't know. Going back to my childhood, he was a childhood favorite of mine as well. So, yeah, I didn't want him to be a bad guy. Episode 4, called Sanctuary, this is really kind of the first real taste of Magnificent Seven. You know, like the stranger rides into town. These people are being terrorized by these thugs. He comes in and basically helps them fight back. I mean, are you a fan of Magnificent Seven, man? Did you get that when you started watching this particular episode?
I didn't, but now that you mention it, it is very similar. I mean, just the whole kind of hero for hire vibe. It's there.
Yeah, I love that. Hero for hire. Yeah. It's very Luke Cage. But yeah, man, it's that idea that, again, we don't know if this guy's a good or a bad guy. He kind of seems dangerous. He's got armor. He's got a weapon. He can obviously protect himself. We should get him to help us. Like, I mean, who do you go to get help against the bad guy? Another bad guy, because he speaks their language, right? So
yeah.
Maybe you go hire that guy to help you, and if the price is right and you got enough money, they won't kill you in return. So, you know, it seems kind of warped logic, but I guess if you're in that situation, it would make all the sense in the world. This is a chance we have to kind of see his softer side for the first time, which I don't know if I saw that coming at all. But, you know, he meets someone there, and O'Mara, played by Julia Jones, right? And she, I don't know, man, it kind of gives you the taste of what this guy could have had he just been a normal guy with a normal life and not been in this Mandalorian code and all this way of life. And maybe he kind of sees that for a change too, man. It could be some foreshadowing of something to come. I mean, I don't know. Hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, this was our first taste of, you know, kind of like once you leave with the kid, it's kind of like, okay, what is the aim now? Like, are you going to stay on a run? Are you going to settle and just kind of try to have a life? And this was the first peek that we got, like, oh no, he can't have that because it doesn't matter where he goes. This is always going to follow him.
Right. Speaking of following, he's in the cockpit with him in episode 4, and he's telling you, stay here, you stay here. And then he's standing in front of the hatch, and the door opens up, and the child's standing right there with him. And he just looks down as if to say, ugh. It's the coolest thing ever, man. And when he's in the cockpit with him, he's playing with the controls and he won't stop. And he eventually has to put him back in his egg, you know? Oh, such good stuff. It's just the way you said it, man. It's going to follow him around. And dude, that's a great point. What's your end game, Mr. Bounty Hunter? You took off with this kid who supposedly he's 50. Where did I hear that his age has been revealed, that he's 50 years old? Did they say that in the show, or am I dreaming that?
They said it in the show. I can't remember which episode it was, but when the doctor was like analyzing him in that machine, I thought he said it.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a red hot minute since I've watched this entire series. I just did get to season 2 as it just kicked in. But that's a great question. Like, what's plan? Part 2 of the plan. What's the plan? And I think didn't it take a few episodes before he ever actually made the comment, like, I get him back to his people. Did he even say it in season 1?
He did. There was something that happened in one of the episodes, and he was like, he pretty much just had to come to the conclusion he had to take it back. And I think it was when he went back and he saw that all the other Mandalorians were dead, and he talked to the last one there, and she was saying where he's from, and you have to take him back here, and like this is kind of your next move.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I love how he bounces from one location to the next. It really does feel like the traveling outlaw he's just wandering. He's like Kane in Kung Fu. He's just meant to wander the earth or something. But that's kind of what he's doing. The Razor Crest is his ship. And we know that Boba Fett's ship was Slave One. So I don't know what Razor Crest, I'm not even sure what the origin of that name is. But it's funny because it seems like every episode his ship gets damaged. It's constant. Am I wrong about that or what? It seems like every episode, I got to get my ship fixed. It's damaged. Like, again with the ship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it just basically gets torn to pieces by the Jawas. It's just like, I mean, just completely scrapped.
Yes, and by season 2, episode 2, he's got a tear in the hull. And he's going to fly around in the thing. I'm like, might be time to trade that thing in, dude. I don't know what kind of trade-in you can get for that thing, but the Falcon's in better shape at this point. I don't know. Or maybe not. Well, maybe it is. This thing is so the show is 5 years after Jedi. We know that much. We don't know much of anything else in terms of who the baby is. They're keeping that stuff hush-hush, and that's fine. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. I'm going to jump to episode 5, which is appropriately titled The Gunslinger, which you could have just called this entire show The Gunslinger. It would have been fine. But we're in Mos Eisley on Tatooine. So, they're not holding back on anything here, man. Like they're giving you full throttle Star Wars now. I mean, it's, yes, everything looked familiar, but they're going to flat out give it to you. Because let's face it, if you're a Star Wars fan, this is what you're tuning in for. Not just a guy walking around that looks like Boba Fett. You want the actual universe. So, I don't know, man. Talk about some of the ancillary characters that are in this show. Like, you've got the one character that helps him, and I forget the character's name, but she is on, I think she's on Tatooine, pretty sure. And she's kind of a junker, right? And she's got these droids that are there with her. I don't know how I feel about that character. I feel like she could sell him out first chance she gets. I don't know why I don't. Is it weird that I don't trust her? Do you get that vibe from her at all?
No, and actually, every time I see her, I don't know if it's just that her hair is similar to Sigourney Weaver's and
it's a good call.
And Alien. She just reminds me of Ripley every time I see her. Like she just looks like Ripley in Star Wars universe. I don't know if it's just it just makes me feel like Ripley settled somewhere out in the universe and decided to be a mechanic.
That's funny. Actually, or you know what? Yeah, well, you're going to say it that way, you're going to make me like her, but no, I can totally get that. And not for nothing, there's strong references to other franchises in this show.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, again, I'm jumping here, but season 2, we get spiders coming out of eggs, which that's alien, right?
Yeah.
And, I don't know. We got Dune in episode 1 because you've got that sandworm that's underneath the sand, right? So there's that. So it feels like they're kind of bouncing around, taking inspiration from everywhere, man. We were talking before we went on with this episode here about the spiders. Why did that freak you out so much?
Oh my God. So it was just watching how this thing just escalates. It just keeps escalating. Like first, like the smaller ones start popping up and like all the little ones are crawling up. I'm like, this is gross. And then you get the bigger ones and then it's like, no. And then the big one comes out. It's like, no.
It's huge. The thing is massive. And, we're talking about the effects, man. A lot of the effects in the show are practical effects. Because it's a throwback, man. Did you hear about the video wall that they put up when they filmed this show?
I didn't.
Dude, so supposedly they actually put up video walls. And that's how they shoot a lot of the big scenery and stuff. They're not actually there. They've got these massive video walls, which is not that expensive to produce. And they just pop up any imagery they want on there. And so they're using like practical effects because during the COVID era, it's hard to go on location anywhere. So if they can't, they just throw up these video walls and it's like that they're actually there. So now supposedly some other like movie and TV productions are going to start taking a cue from this and start doing their own thing. I mean, you got to get creative in 2020, kids. You got to do what you got to do. But I love the fact that a lot of these effects are practical, man. I think you can see it too.
Yeah, it definitely, makes it feel closer to the original trilogy. I definitely think this has more of a vibe of the original trilogy than some of the other newer stuff we got.
And there was a lot of heartburn at the time when the original trilogy was met with the second trilogy. And people who were my age were saying, oh, well, how are you going to explain all this tech, all this CG compared to the other movies? I mean, how are the other movies, the future of this? Now you're going to go back to the past and the tech is better. Everything looks shinier and it's more polished. And the colors are richer. There's textures and there's vibes to everything. How are you going to explain? And I thought, you're kind of answering your own question. To me, that made perfect sense. Whether or not they looked at it in these terms, I don't know. Because I tend to overthink stuff. But I looked at that in terms of, look, when the Empire won, everything changed. Tech changed. Everything became low rent, so to speak. No one had anything. They took everything from everybody, basically plunged the universe into chaos, robbing people of what they had, of their standing, of their possessions, of their livelihoods, of their planets.
Yeah.
And so that to me made perfect sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at it in that sense, and it's like, and I always thought of it the same way. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like the look of the older trilogy more than the, super shiny, super CG stuff. But I always looked at it like once the Empire took over, we got kind of a dystopic future. And it's kind of like before, like this was like what you would think of like this super advanced sci-fi movie. And then you really are getting a vision of a galaxy that is basically enslaved by this empire. Yes. So there's nothing. There's none of these like huge, gatherings and stuff like we saw in the original, the prequels. And there's none of this like big monarchies and these shiny, buildings and these shiny ships and stuff because everybody's in hiding.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, the Empire's just destroyed everything. I mean, this is what happens when the Nazis win, kids. This is what happens. Had Hitler, had this thing worked, yeah, well, we would be looking at a very different America today and a very different world for sure. I think we're getting somewhat of a taste of that in this. I mean, it makes perfect sense. They claim to be, well, we've got everyone's best interests at heart. We are the way. This is the way you have to go. And then it turns out, nah, they're just all about power. And then, like you said, man, everyone's enslaved. No one has anything. Everyone's dirt poor, literally dirt poor. But yeah, I think you're right. The practical effects, they do rhyme. They have some kind of synergy with the original trilogy. Chapter 6, The Prisoner, has a guest that I didn't see coming. Freaking Bill Burr. Okay, so I'm a Bill Burr fan. I like his stand-up. Dude, what in the world are we doing? Putting a Boston thick accent in this. Am I crazy? Did this not strike you as, why is he in this episode, man? Come on now.
I mean, the thing that I do think they did in the first season really well is they brought a lot of really big names into this cast, and they managed to do it in a way that worked and do all of these interesting characters. Because we didn't really talk about like Gina Carano's character. And just how she fit into the episode so smoothly. Like when you look at her, of course, it's like, well, yeah, this is like famous MMA fighter. Then it's like, but her character just works so well in the episode. And I think Bill Burr works really well in this episode for the same reason.
Because he's a wisecracking, he's shady. Yeah. I mean, I guess. I just can't get past the accent. But Carano's okay. And you're right, I totally skipped past her. Carano's okay because she's badass. I mean, she's kind of a direct translation of what she is, really, if you think about it. But
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a Bill Burr fan, but I'm just, when I saw that, I'm like, God, can I get it? Can I get in the Star Wars universe now? Because, dude, they're putting everybody in. Again, I'm a fan. It's not that I hated him in it, but I'm like, why is he in it? So we saw in this episode too, Ahsoka. Well, not Ahsoka, but like her race. Does her race have a name? Because I'm a little ignorant on that.
I don't know offhand. I'm sure they have a name, but I don't know offhand.
I'm looking it up now because it's going to drive me crazy. I got to tell you, man, this is a direct example of how I was never into the Clone Wars, because I couldn't appreciate what a following that she has. But dude, you're right. She has a huge following. Like, people love this character, man. Like, what is it about her, by the way, that draws such a loyal fan following?
I think she's one of the first new characters for newer generations that people really just felt such an attachment to. And I think it's just her whole character arc from being Anakin's Padawan to, growing into her own character with her own motives. And she's like one of the first Jedi that we see that really challenges the order and decides to make her own path in the world.
Mm. I mean, visually, she's pretty cool. And we found out that she's going to be in this show. She's going to be in season 2. So that'll be interesting.
I didn't even know that.
Oh, dude, yeah. Spoiler alert.
I think you could easily give her own show or own movie, and it would do incredibly well.
I mean, judging from everything I've heard and read, you're totally right. And it'll be interesting to see who they get and how she brings the character to life.
Oh,
and
right? Didn't they? I'm wrong. I did hear that. Didn't they cast Rosario Dawson?
Is it Rosario Dawson? Because if so, I'm in. I love Rosario Dawson.
I think they did. I could be wrong.
I love her to death. She's so good, dude. I've never seen her in anything bad. Well, she did that one Kevin Smith film. I love Kevin Smith. Don't anyone take that wrong. He's a podcasting inspiration for me. That's no lie. And I have most of his movies on DVD and or Blu-ray. It's just, I don't know. But I do love her. She's good in everything. I'm having to look now because let's see the latest, folks. She has publicly campaigned to play the character.
She doesn't have it yet. Okay.
Ahsoka Tano. There you go. But let's see, publicly campaigned to play the character long before she was cast in The Mandalorian. You're right.
Oh, so she was cast. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if there's any still photos yet. I don't know how they would leak something like that. I don't expect there to be any leaks unless it came from them directly.
I don't either. I mean, they've still kept everything around Sasha's character so close to the vest. Like nothing has come out about this thing. So I don't expect to see Ahsoka until she appears in the show.
All right, so part 2 of Tom complains about stuff. I don't not like Sasha Banks, which is how low to pronounce her name. I don't know why. It's just fun. But why is Sasha Banks in Star Wars? All right, look, if she's a fan, I get it. I'm a fan. Put me in. I don't know. What's going on? Like, I don't know. Is she an actor? Has she done anything besides wrestling? Has she just done the wrestling? Like, I don't know. She's wearing black. We assume she's not a good guy, but I have no idea what's going on. Is there any buzz at all about what might be happening with her? Or is it just all speculation?
I think it's all speculation at this point because they've kept it so hush. But for me, I just think when you look at Sasha and when you just look at how people see her outside of our circle and outside of wrestling fans, she just has such an aura to her. She just looks like a star, man. And I mean, perfect example. I was just saying today, because her and Bayley's match is like one of the most highest rated matches on SmackDown and since the pandemic started.
Right.
And I was telling people I wasn't surprised by that because I was talking to my dad on the phone. He was like, "Yeah, so Sasha won her match, right?" And he's not a wrestling fan, and that just tells you how much people are just into her. Like, and I think this is the next step for her in becoming a bigger star. Like when we watched the Rocket movie roles, we watched Cena kind of transition. Like, I think that's where her career is going.
I could see that. I think John's got a natural aptitude because he's so funny. John is a very, not to get off on John Cena, but John is a very ironic sort of presentation. He should be a dumb musclehead. You look, a dumb musclehead jock that was the quarterback that gets all the girls, that beats up nerds in his spare time. But he's kind of a nerd himself. But he's a really good guy, depending on who you believe. There's other people who say otherwise, but I don't know because I don't know him personally. How about that? But man, he's got a great freaking sense of humor. He's so funny. He doesn't mind poking fun at himself. He'll be the first one to do it. And I don't know. I think guys like that have longevity, in my opinion. No wonder he's doing well. I mean, he should. Everything I've heard about him in Hollywood is he's very professional. He always does what he's asked to the first time. So I'd like to see something happen for her. I would. I'm not saying I don't like her. I like her a lot. But, I never understood why you take a girl whose name is Mercedes, who is related to Snoop Dogg, and now you're Sasha Banks. Have fun with that name. Her name is Mercedes. Mercedes Varnado, right?
Yeah.
Dude, are you kidding me? Why do you change that unless your name is Vince McMahon? Why would you change that?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a whole, they have to put their stamp on everything thing. I won't jump into all of that. But Sasha's always been like, to me, she's always been possibly my favorite horsewoman. And I just think she's always stood out. Just in terms of how she wrestles and just how passionate she always seems. And so, I was just happy for her. I was really happy when she got the role because it just seemed like she was so burned out with wrestling a year ago. And she was just so burned out with everything. And just to see her come back and be so successful like this, it's awesome.
Yeah, I like her a lot. I hope it works out for her. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm interested to see what she's going to do, who she's going to be, and all that good stuff. I was talking about the direct links this show has to the Star Wars universe. We get to see an AT-AT walker in episode, what episode am I watching right now? Episode 4. And it's out, it's one of the things that these thugs are using against this village, right? So I think it's the first time we get to see one in the show. And of course, the kids of this village are enamored with the child. They love it to death. And they took it in as one of their own. I could totally see Mando staying on this planet and staying with these people. Because being their protector. I kind of was hoping the show would stay here for a few episodes, honestly. Because I didn't want him to leave them behind. I thought it sucked when he left. But I think that's me getting into the character and, I don't know, want the best for him some weird way. Want him to have a normal life as much as you can on the run with this wacky kid that's 50 and can lift stuff with its mind. Like, And I don't know how much about the Force does Mando really know. And we hear him say, "May the Force be with you" in season 2 to the guys in the X-Wings, which I didn't see that coming at all. That threw me for a loop as well when I saw that. But man, so we know he's aware of it, but I don't know if he realized what the child was doing in that scene, man.
I don't think he does either. He might not have had any he might not have had any experience with Jedi's, but you also got to realize, like, this is post Return of the Jedi. Like, all of the Jedi's are dead. So
True.
This is thinking, like, and we don't see the Sith. Like, all the Sith are part of the Empire, and like there's only 2 of them, and they're deep in. Like, if you see Vader, you're dead. Like,
right.
You're not gonna live to see the tale. So it wouldn't be hard to believe that a lot of people in the galaxy don't actually know what a Jedi is, and don't know like what their powers and abilities look like.
And that's evidenced by the fact in episode 4, Han is referring to it as a hokey religion. And it's just hocus pocus. So, I mean, obviously he's heard the stories growing up, but he didn't believe it. He thought it was crap. Because, like, to your point, it's not. And during that time, the Jedis were done. And, of course, after Jedi, there was only Luke, basically. That was it. Obi-Wan and Luke and Vader. And like you said, if you saw Vader, you're dead. So, which is frightening in and of itself. But let's talk about the big bad that you referenced earlier, Moff Gideon. And I'm telling you, this character threw me for a loop. And if this guy is in the animated series, I'm not sure if he's in Clone Wars or if he was a character that already existed. He first appeared in The Mandalorian. There you go. So, no, this was a surprise, I think, to everybody. I mean, what's your theories on this guy, man? I asked you about your theories on the child. What have you got on this guy? Have you got anything pieced together yet?
Man, first of all, the actor that plays him is fantastic in everything he's in. I mean, Breaking Bad, you name it, he is just fantastic. So
he's in The Boys, isn't he in The Boys?
I haven't watched The Boys, so I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that's him, yeah.
But yeah, so when he shows up in the episode and like we know it's him, it's just like, just like, he's gonna be a badass. And then he like basically just sits and reads everybody and goes, "Oh, I know who you are. I know your whole backstory." It's like it just makes him even more scarier. Like this guy's like this guy's for real. And so, I mean, he just brings like such a different dynamic to the show, because the client is dangerous in itself, because we know he has some kind of connection to the Empire, but this guy is like the real deal. So once that guy is off the table and Moff comes into the picture, it's like, oh no, like he definitely brings this dread to the show. Like, we're doomed. Like, it's nothing we can do with this guy. And so, like, he calls a TIE fighter, and that in itself is cool. But then, like, at the end of the episode, when he looks beat, and he carves out of the starfighter with a darksaber.
Yes.
What? Like I literally like just stared at my screen with my mouth open when I saw that. Like, he has a darksaber. And for people that don't know, darksaber is like it's a lightsaber, quote unquote, but it's not like a Jedi's lightsaber. It's a Mandalorian's blade. Like, it's basically like, if I'm remembering correctly, it was made by the first Mandalorian that was a Jedi, right?
I think that's right, yeah.
And so this is like it's like a historically Mandalorian weapon. Like, usually it's wielded by like the leader of the Mandalorians. So automatically that gives him a tie back to the main character, because of course the main character doesn't know that he has it. I don't know how much Mando knows about that part of Mandalorian beliefs. It just opens so many doors for when we see this guy again. Like, I cannot wait for him to show up in season 2.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I think he will be the primary big bad. And honestly, when he shows back up, I think that's when this show is going to take a serious dramatic turn, because he won't. I don't picture a character like this coming up on the losing end too many times. I think he'll end up with the child, and the show will become Mando trying to get the child back.
This guy, like, he just, he's like, you just can tell right away, like, this guy is like no joke.
Oh yeah, man, he's a real deal. And the shootout that they have where he's there and he's trying to get the child from him. I mean, Chapter 7, The Reckoning is I don't know, it's one of those. It was written by Jon Favreau, and again, dude, they've from everything I've read, they basically handed this thing to Favreau and said, "Go, run, take it." And man, what a great decision, because he's got a vision for this show. He's got the right people around him. He's got Dave Filoni on board. He's got the right people around him. Deborah Cho, who directed this particular episode. I mean, we've said before about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The reason those films work is because Marvel as a company gave their properties to the right people, the right creators, the right visionaries, the right screenwriters, the right actors. I got to feel like Favreau's doing a bang-up job here, man.
Yeah, one of the things I really recognized right away when I first started watching it, and I look at the credits every time it's over, it's like a who's who of people who have been attached to either comic book properties or Marvel properties in some way. I mean, you got Favreau, who of course directed the first two Iron Men. You got the director of Ragnarok. He directed the last episode of season 1.
Yes, Taika Waititi.
Yes, Rick Famuyiwa directed an episode. Like I said before, he was going to direct Flash. I don't know what happened with that. And I think the episode that Rick directed is written or produced by Christopher Yost. And Christopher Yost is like a well-known comic writer. He's written like X-Men and Spider-Man and some other different comics. So it's like a who's who. I mean, like even Bryce Dallas Howard directed the episode, and of course she was in Spider-Man 3.
Absolutely.
So it's just like, I mean, Peyton Reed too. Didn't he direct the episode?
Yes, I think so.
So yeah, I mean, I always notice that like it's so many people that have been attached to Marvel things, and I mean, take that if you will. That could be just like a show of how much Marvel has touched Hollywood at this point.
That could be it. I see that, but I also see these are just good people. They're good creators. They're smart, and this never feels like, to me, this never feels like, well, we're doing this Star Wars thing. We got to do this. Got to do this over here, because so the fans will shut up. It feels like fan service. It doesn't feel like that they're talking down to you, or because listen, man, you've seen and heard the Star Wars fans online. Some of those people are out of their minds. I mean, and you thought the pro wrestling crowd was toxic. Oh my God.
It's a different level.
It's a much different level. Dude, I love the original trilogy. I still think the 3 original movies are the best of anything they've done to this point. I will never name call or verbally attack anybody for any reason because I love those movies. That's the dumbest thing. I don't know. Talk about, Mando, what's his plan? What's someone's plan when they sit there and they just hate everybody? Like, what's that end game?
Yeah, I don't know. I will never understand watching these properties and deciding that they are mine, and I want to be the end all and be all of how these things go. It has to go directly a way I want it, or it's terrible. That's just not how you enjoy stories. That's just not how storytelling works. Like you're given a story, and then we can speculate. That is some of the fun of watching stories, is trying to figure out how it'll end. But sometimes, our theory is wrong, and it's fine for the theory to be wrong. It doesn't have to always be what you want it to be.
And it's like they want to be the curators of the thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like that's an internet age thing more than anything. Everybody wants to kind of dictate the culture, and it's like, no, that's just not how it works. And I mean, if that's the case, then you need to get pen to paper, and you need to get typing on these things that you want to create.
Yeah, just do it. Even if the only people that read are your friends, at least you're getting your, I'm a big believer in putting your voice out there.
Yeah.
I mean, even if all you do is you put it online one time, hey, if 5 people read it, that's 5 people that could live in another country you may never meet, but at least they could say, hey, man, that was pretty cool. I mean, to me, it's important to get your voice out there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a creator like I am. It's hard for me to not create something. I'm not one of those guys that just comes home and just sits here. I'd lose it. I have to podcast, or I have to write. I have to do something. I have to play the bass. I don't know. I have to have an outlet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've told people before, like as a writer, and I drew for a long time. And I always say, like, some of the magic of creating is taking something that doesn't exist, like taking a blank piece of paper and turning it into something meaningful. Like, I feel like that is real magic to me. Like, it's something really special about it. And I feel like that's something that only creators understand.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you explain this to someone else, and they just go, "What's that mean?" They just don't get it. But it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. It just means that you, for lack, I don't know, chase the dragon. Maybe you're chasing this thing that you can't catch, and I'm sure it's an incredibly wrong reference, but it's like you're chasing this thing that you can never get. But yeah, it's just that drive to keep going. We can't wrap this up without at least talking about some of the more colorful names in the Star Wars universe that continue to get colorful as time goes on. Because Carl Weathers is Grief Karga. And I'm okay with that, I suppose, but I don't know why he's Grief Karga. Gina Carano's character is Cara Dune, which is fine. I think I can get that. Moff Gideon, he's a Moff, okay? So there's Grand Moff Tarkin. So, who was Peter Cushing, the famous Peter Cushing, the great Peter Cushing, who was Vader's right-hand man for years. So again, I've not done enough research to understand what the Moffs are supposed to be, but they were elite rulers of the Empire. They were like basically second command, is my understanding, like a top officer or something. So he's obviously one of them. So,
yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the main bad guy in Rogue One a Moff as well?
I think you're right.
I could be wrong, but I thought he was a Moff too. Like, he has that long, big white cape.
Orson Krennic? Does that sound right? Yeah.
I think so.
But I don't know if he's classified a Moff. I love how by the end of that film, they've basically just dismissed him as being nobody. Like, he was the heavy of that film, and then, like, he just kind of gets cut down to size, and yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere. But, yeah, he... I don't know. I laugh at the names. You know, there's like name generators online. You can so you put in like your mother's maiden name. You take the first two letters of this name, whatever, and come up with your own Jedi. So my Star Wars name was Claudio Julin, which is actually pretty darn perfect because of course it's Claudio Julin. What else would it be? Because it makes perfect sense. It just sounds like, I don't know. I think everyone's still trying to do Han Solo, and they can't do any better than Han Solo.
Yeah.
So they're chasing that dragon, I guess. So how do you feel with only 2 episodes in of season 2 of this show? Do you think they're still on track? Do you think it's lost anything? You think it's just as good, better? With only 2 episodes in, how are you feeling?
I'm on board, but see, I just binge watched everything maybe 2 weeks ago from first season. So I'm still kind of like on a high after the first season.
Right.
And the first 2 episodes, I'm kind of at, watching it at the pace that it comes out now. So I'm just kind of like watching it ramp up because, I mean, we already know all of this stuff is in a backdrop. Like, we know Ming-Na's character is still alive somewhere. We know Moff is still out there, Moff Gideon. And so, like, we have all these things that are kind of building around, and we've got like the reveal at the end of the first episode of all these things that are kind of there. So I think they're doing a great job of kind of setting their pieces up and eventually getting to like the bigger stories.
And they're still introducing new characters, or characters that are created for the show, or characters that were created before. And first episode of season 2 features Cobb Vanth, who is, I mean, the episode's called The Marshal. I mean, at this point, they're not even denying it. It's not even, this is kind of like a Western. No, they're flat out saying, all right, look, kids, this is a Western. Just shut up about it. They've got everything but horses, so here you go. So it's so on the nose now. I guess I'm okay with that. But sometimes it's a little too on the nose. It irritates me. You know what I mean? Sometimes I talk to my TV and go, I got it. It's a Western. Move on. Like, just get to the story. Sometimes it drives me nuts, if I'm being honest. But, by the way, this character he better come back in the show because he was great. Timothy Olyphant is Cobb Vanth, right?
Yeah, Oliphant is another one where he just he's fantastic in everything he's in. He just has this charisma that translates in almost every character he does, and this character is no different. Like you almost want him to be the bad of the episode because he kind of has like this vibe to him, like what's up with this guy? But then he turns out to be a good guy, and he's just so cool in this episode. Like when he comes back with the armor and he saved the town. It just that was a great episode.
I mean, yeah, this has got to be Texas of the Star Wars universe because, dude, he's as country gets. I mean, he really is in this. At least it feels that way.
Well, yeah, and I definitely got this vibe. Like this is like a backwoods guy that just gets like this sophisticated bounty hunter armor, and he's just like, yeah, this is what I'm doing with it. Like just randomly sitting in the saloon. Like, yeah, I have like the sophisticated armor with this big rocket pack on the back.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Just sitting around, passing the time, having some drinks, right? So I'm going to bring this episode full circle because we started off with me going on about being a kid and loving the Star Wars stuff. When Boba Fett died in Return of the Jedi, dude, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? From an aesthetic perspective, one of the coolest looking characters. Like Darth, well, you know, I've talked about this before. Like Darth Maul. How do you kill Darth Maul, you friggin' idiot? How do you kill Darth Maul? How do you kill freaking Boba Fett, for crying out loud? You know, like George Lucas, God love him. Without him, we wouldn't have any of this stuff, right? But would have all these cool toys to play with. But dude, how do you kill Boba Fett? Well, spoiler alert, kids. Turns out Boba Fett's not so dead. At the end of episode 1 of season 2, there he is. And I hate that we see him without the mask, but it's cool that it's him. Dude, like, what was going through your head when you saw that? Did you know it was him?
I figured it was him. They haven't officially said it's him yet, but you can kind of tell. I mean, just everything we see in that episode, it kind of is a nod back to him. I mean, just like when we talked about it when I first said I saw the episode, and just the way that Mando knocks Oliphant off out of the way to fight the dragon is exactly the way that Boba Fett dies. Right. The rocket pack backfires. So it's just so many nods to the character in that episode that it just felt like, yeah, it has to be him. And I mean, this the name of the show is The Mandalorian. Like I couldn't foreseeably see them doing a Mandalorian show and not addressing the most famous Mandalorian in the Star Wars mythos.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I love the fact, and maybe this isn't how it happened, but in my head this is how it played out, so I'm gonna stick with it. They gave Favreau this property and said, "Hey, do right by it. Do your worst. Do your thing, man. Make this thing come to life." And I can imagine the first thing he said is, "Can I bring back Boba Fett?" Which may not have happened, but I hope it did.
Well, I mean, there's like novels where it's revealed that he was not dead, right? I don't know if any of that stuff is canon. Well, no. I mean, I guess this is, maybe it's canon now because it's in the show. I don't know.
It will be now. They got it out of Lucas's hands. They could do stuff they couldn't do before. I mean, for better and worse. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But
Boba Fett's definitely one of those characters that like we didn't see a whole heck of a lot of in the original series, but he was always so cool, and I always kind of wanted to know more about him. It was kind of like Lando. Like we didn't see that much about Lando in Empire Strikes Back, and so it's kind of like I kind of want to know like what else is it other than he was Han Solo's friend. Like what else is there about this character?
Yeah, that the backstory between him and Han. Why does he have such an axe to grind? I don't know. That's a great point, man. And again, unless you've read every novel, read every comic adaptation, read everything out there, seen every, it's such an odd universe in some ways because there's so much stuff there that was never officially recognized by the guy that ran the whole thing. That's bizarre to me. Like, I don't know why that surprised me so much. I think that's why people tend to get lost in this and not know who characters are, right?
It almost feels like he just did too good of a job of world building with this thing, where it's just so many different pieces to this thing. Like and I mean, like this thing went decades before it was revisited again on at least in the movies. I mean, we got the comics and all these other things, but the fact that all those things happened is because he just did such a fantastic job of putting this world together with all of these different moving parts.
Yeah, and it's almost like it just breeds itself. It just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you could take this thing anywhere. They've took it anywhere. I mean, it's high tech, but it's not high tech. I don't know. It's I like the fact that it's still going. There's a lot of stuff that I personally wouldn't have done with the new trilogy, which maybe one day we'll do a show about that. But I don't know, man. I mean, for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm definitely happy with this series. Before we take this thing home, what about episode 2? I'm going to get your take on this. We talked about this before we went on the air. We talked about the spider thing a little bit, which I know kind of got to you. What about the fact that the child ate how many of these species? Eggs? Dude, I was almost crying. I was laughing so hard when this happened. Like...
The last shot of the episode,
yes,
and they're just sitting there, and he's looking at it like, "Oh, I can't get any more." And then he just comes out of his pocket with one more and eats it. Like, what?
Yeah, he turns around and faces the camera, and he's got one. You're like, "Oh my god!" I mean, this thing has to be Yoda. It's got to be because I immediately flash back to Empire and to Jedi. Well, most of the Empire when he's eating. And he's cooking Luke some food, and Luke's like, "This stuff's disgusting. I can't eat this. You have people food or whatever." Like, it's gotta be Yoda, man. Like, yeah, just that scene. He's such a kid. They've done a masterful job of making this kid this thing. It's a Muppet dude. This thing, and let's be honest. When they get this thing in broad daylight, it is obviously not living and breathing, but which kind of shocks me that it's not better, if I'm being honest. But dude, I don't even care because they do such a great job of giving it a personality. I just excuse the fact that it doesn't look like an actual living, breathing, creature. It feels real because of the personality.
Yeah, and that's kind of the magic of Star Wars. Like Star Wars has managed to take like these like extremely minute side characters, and they kind of become the star of these things. Like kind of R2D2 became like the biggest star of the original trilogy. I mean, and you kind of look at the newer trilogy, and it's like BB-8 is the same thing. Like BB-8 is a ball that is rolling around making beeping noises, and people love this thing. Like it has so much personality without saying anything, without really basically emoting. And I think that's just the magic of Star Wars and just how well they get character down without having to give you direct dialogue sometimes or having to ram you over the head with what this character is.
Yeah, they find a way to connect you. They make you feel something for it. Like, I mean, if they can do that, they've done a good job. And obviously they have. I love the point about R2. He is... I mean, dude, when I was a kid, R2 was the favorite. He was the takeaway for little kids from that movie. Before the Ewoks ever happened, it was, I love R2. Who's your favorite character? R2. And it's like, shouldn't Luke be your favorite character? He's the hero. Well, yeah, he's great, but I love R2. Like, there's something about that character that drew kids to him. And, a lot like the child, he's got that playful, childlike innocence about him. Like, R2's kind of a smart mouth, too. If you believe anything 3PO says. Smarts off constantly. So, before we put a pin in this, man, you got any predictions for what's going to happen this season? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I know nothing. I mean, you could read all the speculation all day. But I think one of the things about the whole COVID situation is there's no real... Well, I got this photo they were filming, and I got a picture of it. Like, you don't really have any of that happening, so... there's no real spoilers happening, but if you can make some predictions, what do you think's going to happen in season 2?
I almost want to assume that Sasha's character works for Moff.
I agree.
I think that's where this is going. I don't know if that means that she is a Sith or what, but it just seems like she has to have some kind of connection to Moff Gideon. Other than that, I haven't pieced anything else together, and I haven't really speculated or really looked up and read anything. I've been just enjoying watching it as it comes because I just don't think we take enough time to do that now. I think a lot of us are just so into watching and seeing everything that's behind the curtain. And I think it's kind of ruined a lot of things for us. Like we said earlier, everybody wants to write the story as it's going instead of just enjoying it.
Right.
And so I've been just like watching it as I go and just being along for the ride.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Here's something I don't want Sasha to be. I don't want her to be someone's daughter.
No, me neither.
For God's sake, let's get off the family ties stuff, man, because I'm an OT kind of guy, right? It's how I roll. But enough with we had to connect everybody back to Luke Skywalker and Anakin. Enough of that. Like, I don't want her to be anybody's daughter. Having said that, she could be, Carl Weathers' daughter in this show.
I didn't think of that.
Oh, I hope I'm wrong because I don't need that. Yeah, it's better if she's dark and mysterious,
Maybe she's Gideon's daughter.
Oh, it could be. That's a good point.
But who knows? I really think she has some kind of connection to Moff Gideon.
Yeah, I mean, she could be a Sith Lord. Could be in training. She could be like a Darth Maul, where she's not quite there yet, but she's in training, and she's. I don't know. She takes out lightsaber. It's going to be game on, man.
I mean, we've seen every other assassin almost. We've seen assassin droids. We've seen all these other guild assassins. I mean, this is a Sith assassin. I wouldn't be surprised.
That'd be something if she starts throwing them around using the Force. That'd be crazy. Well, it's funny. We don't often do shows about stuff that's still going. Sometimes we'll do stuff that's already happened, like a movie that's already happened, a show that's already happened, a guy that's already left wrestling or whatever. So this is an ongoing thing. So the cool thing about this, we might could come back at some point, revisit this topic, and there might be something massive happen in season 2. If I'm not mistaken, I think season 3 has already been greenlit, has it not?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's doing so well. I feel like it's inevitable.
I agree with that. So, in as much as you can, in terms of, again, this thing's still going. We don't know where it's going yet. What's your last word on The Mandalorian?
I would say it's probably a pleasant surprise. I think we are so jaded in some ways. Like, we're getting so much Star Wars stuff so fast that it's kind of like, well, it's just another Star Wars thing. And I really feel like this is special. Like, I feel like it's going to become one of those cult classics eventually.
I agree with that. I think I see this thing going for a long time. I'd be shocked if this thing didn't go at least 5 seasons or more. I think it could go potentially longer than that, depending on how successful the Disney app, Disney Plus, keeps going. And I think it will be, especially in this era when stuff's going direct to on demand, which I see this thing being successful and going for a good long time. I'd love to see this character on the big screen at some point. That'd be interesting to see how they could work that in. Don't know if they could. The timing probably all wrong. But I want to go back to one of your points earlier, which you said about how this universe is huge, and it does kind of take on a life of its own, no matter whose hands it ends up in. So I think we're seeing proof positive of that. There's enough fan service here for guys like me who love the original trilogy, but there's also enough here for people who are just coming on board, and I feel like everybody in between, which is why I think this thing has been the hit that it's been so far. The acting's impeccable. There's some great characters in this show, and I can't wait to see what comes next. It's become one of my favorite things to watch. As soon as it hits the streaming service, I can't wait to see it. So we'll see what goes on from here, but I'm along for the ride. They've hooked me. So we'll see what happens next. And that is The Mandalorian. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.